Alright, so I am outside today. You might hear some car noises because I am right off of a busy road. I will try to speak up so that you are able to hear me reading our read aloud for today. But before I start our joke today, why did the teddy bear say no to dessert? Because he was stuffed. Alright, so we are on chapter 9 in Torpedoed. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading that to you. It's only a torpedo. Down on the lowest deck, the Corp children woke with a start, some just from the thwack of the torpedo, others from furniture crashing on top of them or water rushing into their cabins. Some children were killed instantly, though nobody would ever know how many. Others were injured from falling debris, some of them so seriously that they would not recover. A loud bang woke 9-year-old Jack Keeley. Then he heard the alarm bells. He jumped out of bed, quickly put on his boots, not taking the time to put on socks first. He'd slept in his pajamas and did not put on clothes or even his coat. He grabbed his life jacket and ran into the corridor. There was a terrible mess. Shards of glass, broken furniture, and other pieces of the ship spewed out from the explosion. His sister Joyce was on the girl's side of the ship. Was she awake too? As Jack made his way through the hallway, stepping on broken glass and wood, his senses were assaulted. So there is the picture. The noise was overwhelming. The loud alarm bells, more glass shattering, and people screaming and shouting. There was a dense blue haze filling the air and a terrible, acrid odor. It was cordite, used to make explosives, bombs, torpedoes. Jack ran quickly up the stairs to the upper decks. He knew exactly what he was supposed to do. Go to his muster station and get into his assigned lifeboat. Joyce should be doing the same. In his cabin, Fred Steels had been asleep in the bottom of a bunk bed. The top bunk was empty. When the torpedo hit, the upper bunk fell on him. Water from burst pipes came pouring in, soaking him as he struggled to get out from under the collapsed bed. He managed to squirm free. He knew he had to get out quickly. The cow his mother had sold to the skipper wouldn't protect him now. He woke up one of his roommates, Paul Shearing, 11, who had slept through the explosion. Their other roommate was sitting up in bed crying and looking for his glasses. "Get out of bed, come on," Fred told the boy. But he just kept looking for his glasses. Paul got his life jacket, and he and Fred tried to get out of the cabin, but the door was stuck. As they pushed and pulled, they urged the other boy to come with them. But the boy didn't move. Finally, the door unjammed. "Come on," they told him, but he didn't. Fred and Paul ran into the hall. They never knew whether their roommate found his glasses or even managed to get out. He did not survive the night. In the hall, the alarm bell sounded to Fred like the very devil. The noise was so loud it made his ears hurt. He remembered that they'd been told that if they got torpedoed, at least they had the naval escorts to pick them up. But he didn't know the warships had left many hours earlier, or that the ships in the convoy were dispersing at this very moment. All but one, that is, the SS Marina, a freighter. At 10:05, the freighter's bridge sent a message to its crew that the SS City of Benares had been torpedoed and the convoy was being attacked. The captain called, "All hands at once!" The Marina stayed to see whether it could help. But on the submarine, Ajax Blykrot had another idea. On U-48, the crew congratulated themselves. They had no idea there were children on board. This had been a real victory. So now we're talking about the boat that torpedoed the kids. German U-boat commanders competed with each other over how many tons they sank, and the Benares was over 11,000 tons. Ajax and his crew were thrilled that it was such a big ship. A few of the crew members went up into the conning tower to see what was going on. They saw that the ship was on fire and already sinking. "We watched the lifeboats going down," Rolf Hilse later said. The crowd cheered, but Ajax silenced them. There was another ship they could hit. The minute they saw people going into lifeboats, they went after the next target. 6 minutes after they hit the Benares, Ajax and his crew torpedoed the Marina. The torpedo hit in 43 seconds. Rolf Hilse noted in his log another 5,000 tons. As soon as the torpedo hit, the crew of the Marina got into their 2 lifeboats, but only one of the boats went down well. The other experienced a lot of trouble, landing badly and filling partway with water. This lifeboat would end up alone at sea for 8 days, until it met a small vessel bound for Glasgow. The properly launched lifeboat stayed close to the scene of the disaster. This would both help and hurt the passengers of the Benares. For some, it would mean rescue. For others, it would mean confusion. That led to abandonment. For when help finally arrived, the extra lifeboat led to a miscount, and 1 lifeboat with 36 survivors of the Benares would be missed. So 1 lifeboat goes missing. Back in the children's section, everyone was trying to get out. There was a huge hole where the torpedo had struck, and water was pouring in. Johnny Baker and his older brother Bobby had been fast asleep. They woke when the alarm bell started ringing and quickly got out of their cabin and headed for their muster station. They moved so quickly that little Johnny forgot his life jacket, but he didn't think of it then. He just ran, fast as usual. Bobby made sure to stay with him this time. The sick escort, Father Rory O'Sullivan, was in a very deep sleep because the doctor had given him a sleeping pill. When the torpedo hit, the explosion threw him out of bed. Afterward, he lay on the floor listening to the cracking of splitting wood. The cupboard, table, chairs, and mirror had all crashed to the floor and were in a heap around him. In a leaden state, he pulled himself up and walked around the dark cabin, looking for his raincoat and his life jacket. He managed to find them, but his feet got cut up walking on broken glass. He couldn't find his flashlight, or any clothes or shoes. He pulled and pulled at the door, but it was stuck. He couldn't get out. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally realized he was pulling at the door of his wardrobe, not the cabin. When he found the right door, it was actually ajar. Some of his boys had opened it for him, and there were boys still in the corridor. He would try to help them get to their boats. The furniture in Bess Walder's cabin rocked violently and smashed to the floor when the torpedo hit. She was shaken right out of her bed. Lying there, she could smell oil and the acrid odor of cordite. Then she heard louder and even more terrifying bangs. Bess knew immediately what had happened. So did her roommates, Alyssa Murphy and Patricia Allen. They were wartime children. After all, Bess would say later, and of course, on the bulletin, Patricia had faced the same thing. She had survived that torpedo strike. All the kids had. That was reassuring. Bess took charge of the 2 younger girls. She made sure they got dressed quickly, which wasn't easy in the dark, crowded cabin. It was terribly hard to maneuver through all the toppled furniture. Bess grabbed her heavy green bathrobe, her beloved ratty robe. Was it just a week ago she'd argued with her mother about bringing this very robe? Mrs. Walder had come home from a shopping trip, all happy with the surprise, a flowery, lightweight dressing gown. "Now you can have this for going away, Bess," her mother said proudly. "You can't take your old one. It's a disgrace." Bess knew her mother had had to use precious ration coupons to buy the new robe, but she didn't care. She didn't like it. She stamped her foot and said no. She wanted to take her old familiar robe, a bright green one with nice deep pockets. Sure, it was itchy because it was wool, but she didn't mind. It was warm and she was comfortable in it, and it was hers. She'd won that battle, and so now, amid the ringing of alarm bells and the smell of cordite and smoke, was there fire too? Bess put on her old, warm, bright green woolen robe, and over it she put her life jacket. She made sure that Elisa and Patricia put on their life jackets too. These weren't fitted kapok ones, but the big, cumbersome ones with huge cork panels in the back and front. The cork swelled up in the water and kept you from going under. That would come in handy later, but now they were unwieldy. Once the girls had them on, it was even more difficult to move. The 3 of them in those big cork life jackets with furniture tumbled all around. Bess got Patricia out of the cabin and sent her upstairs to the lifeboats. Patricia had been through this before. She wouldn't know what to do. But when Bess went back for Alyssa, she couldn't get into the cabin. Something was blocking the door. She grabbed something, she didn't even know what, and made a big enough hole in the door to crawl through. Alyssa had fallen and was bleeding a lot. Bess was afraid she was bleeding to death. She had to get herself and Elisa out of there. In the time it took her to reach Elisa and move back toward the door, the furniture had shifted and the wardrobe was blocking the way. It was too heavy for Bess to move. She banged and banged on the wardrobe, but would anyone hear her over the ringing alarm bells that shattered the shattering glass and other people yelling? All over the ship, crew members were working to save passengers. They were getting the lifeboats ready to be launched and helping people into them. After this was all over, the senior surviving officer would issue commendations, including one to Captain's boy Abdul Supad for his heroism, for his devotion to duty at the launching of the boat, assisting passengers at the boat, and again whilst in the boat. Abdul was cheerful and positive during the crisis. Sadly, he died of exposure before rescue arrived. Some of the crew were searching for people below decks, trapped in their cabins or behind debris in the corridors, especially the Corp children, whose section of the ship had been devastated by the torpedo. Captain Nicole and Admiral McKinnon were directing it all. The worst had happened, the thing Nicole had desperately tried to avoid, and now the captain was determined to save his passengers. He knew how bad the damage was. He knew the Benares was going down fast. His crew had to get everyone into lifeboats immediately, especially the children. Of course, help from the Royal Navy was on the way, but when it would arrive was impossible to say. When the torpedo struck at 10:03, the ship's radio operators had sent out a coded SOS. The message reached a Royal Navy station in Scotland at 10:06. By 10:30, the commander of the Navy's Western Approaches office in Liverpool, which monitored activity in the North Atlantic, had the decoded message. The SS Benares had been hit by a torpedo. Corp children were on board. Help had to be sent with utmost dispatch. The Winchelsea, the destroyer that had left the Benares convoy, was the closest Royal Navy ship. It could have turned around and rescued the Benares passengers, but the Western Approaches commander decided to keep the Winchelsea on its mission, escorting a convoy coming from Canada carrying vital supplies for the war effort. Earlier in the day, the Winchelsea had rescued the captain and crew from the British merchant Crown Arun, a straggler from an incoming convoy that had been torpedoed. The Western Approaches commander instead tapped HMS Hurricane, another destroyer, which was leading convoy OB-214 out from England toward Canada. The Hurricane was farther away than the Winchelsea, about 300 miles from the scene of the disaster. In good weather, at maximum speed, it would take more than 7 hours to reach the Benares' last known location. With the bad weather, it would take even longer. Still, the Western Approaches commander decided the Hurricane was the best option. Western Approaches sent a message to the Hurricane. When it reached the Hurricane's radio room, the young telegraphist yelled, "One for us! City of Benares torpedoed!" It gave the location, N56.43, W21 and 15, so it's north and west is what that means, and said, "Proceed immediately, best possible speed, utmost dispatch." The captain of HMS Hurricane was Lieutenant Commander Hugh Crofton Sims. He had a 1-year-old son at home. When he saw the words best possible speed, he knew that meant women and children were on board. He didn't know yet how many children. He didn't know there were 100 children on that ship. But he knew he had to get there, and fast. In their cabin, Bess banged and hammered on the door, crying out. The room was filling with water. Elisa was still bleeding profusely. On the Hurricane, Sims considered his options. The problem was the weather. How fast could he make a ship go in a storm with winds that raged up to 50 miles an hour? The faster he sailed, the more he put the lives of his crew in danger. He had to keep a ship upright and water-free. Of course, he knew that if the weather was bad where he was, it was likely to be bad where the survivors of the Benares were, presumably in open, exposed lifeboats, in the cold of the North Atlantic in a storm. And children would not survive long in such conditions. Best possible speed. Erring on the side of caution, Sims upped his speed from 12 knots to only 15, about 17 miles per hour, until and if the weather got better. Then he would go faster. He wanted to get there as quickly as he could, but he had to actually get there. "Help!" Bess yelled. "We're in here!" Finally, she heard something on the other side. Thwack! Thwack! It was someone with a hatchet. She stood back as the crewman made a hole in the door. Bess wrapped her coat around Elisa and helped her out of the cabin. Luckily, one of the escorts came by and took the 10-year-old in her arms. Bess could see Elisa was doing very poorly, but she was being so brave. Beth Cummings was in the hallway also, having troubles of her own. Her roommate Joan Irving was hurt badly. Though Beth and Bess couldn't see any blood, Joan couldn't move. Bess helped Beth drag Joan along. They had to go up to the children's playroom, their muster station. And yet, when they got to the staircase to walk up to the children's room, it wasn't there. The staircase had disappeared completely. There was no way up. The alarm bells were ringing loudly in their ears, ringing and ringing. The girls turned and quickly walked the other way. They found another staircase. They made it up the next second, hurried toward the children's room. "I'll go and have a look," Beth told Bess. But Beth found nothing where the children's room should be. Nothing there at all. The site, the deck gone, the toys, the rocking horse, everything gone was devastating. Beth could see the remnants of the little nook where she and Bess used to talk. Soon that would disappear too. The ship was disintegrating. Huge gaps were appearing by the minute. You could look right down through the bottom of the ship into the sea. Sailors kept pushing children away from the holes, away from certain death. Only minutes had passed since the torpedo hit. Mary Cornish was still making her way down to find her girls, passing Corp children who were coming up. She was desperate to find Gussie, Violet, and Connie Grimmett, the lovely art student. Rosemary Spencer Davis, impish Maureen Dixon, Lillian Watson with her blonde corkscrew curls, Eleanor Wright, the 2 pairs of sisters, all her girls, all of them. She had to get them all safely into a lifeboat. When she got down to the children's deck, Mary saw nothing. Where the children's bathrooms had been, the torpedo had struck just below the children's loos, blown them all to bits. The hole she saw was the size of a London bus. Below the deep, dark abyss of the sea, more holes were opening up. She had to find her girls. Mary kept going through the hallway filled with collapsed walls and thrown furniture. Debris blocked her way to the girls' cabins. She had to get there. No crew were around just then to help. So with her bare hands, Mary tore aside the wreckage, wrenching away big pieces of furniture. The splintered wood shredding the skin on her hands, she made a hole big enough to crawl through. So she is trying to find her girls in her group. And she is not having much luck yet. On the other side was another escort, Lillian Towns. Lily had some of Mary's girls with her, including Gussie, Violet, and Connie Grimmett. Thank goodness. Mary and Lillian and a ship's engineer worked together to rescue other children from their shattered cabins. One girl was seriously hurt and unconscious, but they managed to get her out and hand her off to a sailor. He would get her to a lifeboat. All the girls were in their pajamas, and only their pajamas. Many of them had been hurled out of their beds. There was no chance in the dark and the chaos for them to put on coats and shoes, and now there was no time to go back for warmer clothes. With the ship listing and disintegrating around them, Mary and Lillian had to get the girls on deck and into lifeboats. The girls did not panic. They knew the drill. Okay. They had their life preservers. That was a motorcycle. They moved quickly and calmly, but of course they were frightened. Mary soothed them with the only thing she could think to say. "It's all right, it's only a torpedo." She told them, "It's only a torpedo?" Mary knew all they had to do was get up on deck. They would be put in lifeboats, and there would be crew to help them. When she saw other Corp children, she urged them, "Make sure you get to your muster station. Make sure you keep going." When they looked frightened, she reassured them, "It's only a torpedo." Mary didn't know it yet, but it was only the torpedo. The storm was raging again, and it was growing stronger. The high waves and strong winds and the tilt of the sinking ship, which was still moving, made the launching of the lifeboats precarious. The freezing rain and cold wind ripping through thin pajamas made time an enemy too. But there was nothing anyone could do except get to the lifeboats